This podcast describes events that may be disturbing to some listeners, including violent assault and stalking. Please take care while listening. You're listening to Dakota Spotlight. My name is James Wallner. This is Season 10, You Killed Chris, A Friend's Fight for Justice. Welcome to Episode 5. Linda's decades-long quest to solve Christine's murder had some unexpected outcomes for her. For one, she became the world's most renowned expert on the life of Niels Jorgensen.
The years were passing, and I was learning more about his family. I knew every little tidbit about his mom and his dad and his brothers, everything else from family, and they'd send me articles and tell me stuff about what they knew about it.
According to her book, Murder on the 56th Day, Niels' parents were both from Denmark. They immigrated to the United States in 1919. Niels was born in 1925 and his younger brother, Soren, 4 years later. The family lived in California in North Hollywood, and Niels' father, a dentist, would become world-renowned for inventing the Jorgensen technique of sedation for dental patients. He taught dentistry at Loma Linda University School of Dentistry. Niels would attend that same school himself, but he didn't follow in his father's footsteps. Instead of pursuing dentistry, he set out to become a physician.
From 1955 until Chris's murder, it's kind of a blotchy story.
In her research, Linda discovered that there were lots of gaps in Niels' history. In fact, a lot of the things he told people were not true in the first place. For example, when Jorgensen arrived at the UW campus and applied for the residency position, the staff there were unable to verify certain aspects of his background. Of course, Niels had an explanation for this.
He said, the reason that it's not there is because I was a medical missionary in Africa all these years.
As you may have guessed by now, Linda, in her persistent and dogged way, got to the bottom of this too. According to Linda, Niels Jorgensen was never in Africa.
He never had applied for nor received a passport at any time during his life. I'm 100% sure of that. Secondly, he had said that he was at a specific hospital in South Africa, and it turned out that there was a doctor named Larson who years later wrote a book about that specific hospital and that community between the 60s to the 70s.
And so, of course, Linda bought the book and she read the book. Then she wrote a letter to the author under the guise of wanting to talk about an old friend of hers.
It was another good person that I had to mess with, okay? And I said, do you remember my friend Niels Jorgensen? He was also a doctor there at that time. Do you have any memories or anything that you can share with me about him? And I sent off my letter.
A few weeks later, the author called Linda on the phone.
He says, I don't have any recollection of that guy, and I was there for 15 years. No, he was never here during that whole time frame. He says, it was a small hospital, and the staff was all very tight.
According to Linda, Niels Jorgensen's whole life was basically a sham and a con.
Oh, everything he said, from his military career to the fact that he never completed his residency. He never became a doctor, or a full-fledged trauma doctor.
Linda also discovered that Niels' American Medical Association license fees were not paid for the following years: 1955, 56, 57, and 58, 1960, 61, 63, 64, 65, 66, and 1967. And then, the same year he popped up in Madison, 1968, suddenly he paid his medical license fee.
He lied about his family, lied about his role in the World War II.
Niels told people he was divorced, although he had never been married. He told people his younger brother had died in the war, while in fact, his brother had died while scuba diving. Basically, from the years 1955 to 1974, when his father died, his family and relatives had no idea where Niels was located. After his father's death in 1974, Niels moved back in with his now 86-year-old mother. He convinced her to sell her plush home in North Hollywood and to purchase them a 2-bedroom apartment in Marina del Rey, California. In her search for the truth about Niels Jorgensen, Linda left no stone unturned. When she learned through a friend of Jorgensen's that Niels often bragged about being a big shot around Marina del Rey and a VIP at a restaurant in Los Angeles, Linda looked into that too.
I contacted the owner of that place, and I talked to him about my good friend because I said I might like to do a party there since he's so popular there. And I says, I'd like to have a party for him and surprise him. And he says, I know my regular customers. He says, believe me. He says, I know everybody. And Niels Jorgensen did not exist on his list in any shape or form by name or description. His whole life was just one big lie. He had no reality. He was such a failure and everything. He created his own reality and lived in the glitter of that false reality. There was nothing about him at any time that was ever true. It was basically always Niels Jorgensen in some shape or form, but it wasn't Niels Jorgensen. It wasn't him.
40 years after the murders, Linda had learned a lot about Niels Jorgensen, but she had never spoken with the man.
After 40 years, I decided I have to do a memorial for Chris. I planned the memorial. I had to go through the chancellor and everything, and everybody was cooperative.
The memorial was to take place on the campus by the Carillon Tower, which had been one of Christine's favorite spots at UW. Linda even arranged for music to be played in the tower during the ceremony.
And I contacted all the press, television, radio, newspaper, everything. I had everything lined. My ducks were all in a good row.
And then, leading up to the event, Linda came up with an idea. It may seem like an odd idea, but in her own way, Linda was constructing a deceptive plan to get Jorgensen to hopefully incriminate himself in Christine's murder. She wrote a letter to Niels Jorgensen
about the memorial, when it was and everything. And I said, the only thing missing is you. I says, I'd like to invite you to be the keynote speaker at the memorial. I said to him, you're the best person to talk since you murdered her. I wrote that in the invitation. I said, you murdered her, so you know you've got the most you can say about all this.
In the letter, Linda included her address and phone number. She asked for a prompt answer so that she could plan accordingly for her keynote speaker. A few days later, Linda came home to 8 messages on her answering machine. In the first 7 recordings, the caller had simply hung up without saying a word.
I thought, oh, God, what is this? Finally, there was somebody who, after all these hours of hang-ups, left a message, and it was Niels Jorgensen.
Linda was eager to call Jorgensen on the phone right away, but her husband advised a different approach.
Get your thoughts together on this before you talk to him, so it might be the only time you get to talk to him. So I waited until the next evening after I spent the whole day just slaving over my questions and how I would speak to him. I thought, I have nothing to lose on this. You know, what can I lose?
And so Linda called up Niels Jorgensen, the man who had just received a letter from her, a letter that said, hey, since you killed Chris, why not be the keynote speaker at her memorial on the 40th anniversary of her death? As soon as Linda was on the phone speaking with Jorgensen, she felt confident she was talking to Christine's killer. To begin with, he didn't react in a way a normal person would after receiving a letter like that. As Linda says, what she was expecting him to say was something like this.
Are you some crazy person? And if so, tell me who you are so I can report you? How dare you even insinuate that I'm familiar with this horrendous crime?
But that's not what Niels Jorgensen had to say.
First off, he says they'll probably, and he was laughing, he said they'd probably arrest me before I even get off the plane. And he says, and secondly, are you going to pay all my expenses?
Linda told Jorgensen very matter-of-factly she would not be paying for his expenses.
He says, you got a pencil and paper? And he was real condescending to me. He says, I have a message for you for Dick Josephson.
Now let's recall who Dick Josephson is. Dick Josephson was a detective who worked on this case. We met him in an earlier episode. Today he's 90 years old.
I remember Christine, and I have always wondered, who for sure actually killed her.
Niels Jorgensen met Dick Josephson in September of 1968, when the task force flew first to Detroit and then on to New York to question him about Christine's murder. According to one news article, the task force from Madison interrogated Jorgensen for 4 hours one day, and then later they wanted to re-interview him again. But by then, Jorgensen was no longer cooperating.
When we went to talk to him, it was very short, and then he wanted to leave, and of course we had nothing to say he can't, so the next thing we know, he declined the polygraph. And after that, UW took over. So I don't know what, if anything, they did after that.
And here it was now 40 years later, and according to Linda, she was talking to Jorgensen on the phone, and Jorgensen was dictating a message to Detective Josephson.
And I took down the message verbatim, how he wanted to tell Dick Josephson what a dumb hick cop he was and how he couldn't solve the case because he was too stupid and he was too dumb to check for the murder weapon in the autoclave at University Hospital. And then he had me read it back to make sure I had it right because I was just a dumb person. I says, why don't you call him? I'll give you the number. He says, you call him. And he said, and call him soon, it was basically. And that was kind of the end of the conversation. And so I contacted Dick Josephson the next evening, and I gave him his message from Niels Jorgensen. But I learned one thing quickly. I understood, first of all, he was in control of the conversation because he had no interest in chit-chatting or saying, who the heck are you, or what is this about? Nothing. He knew what it was about. I knew what it was about. It was a matter of he had a thought in his mind, and the only important thing to him was controlling that it was conveyed as he directed.
So Niels Jorgensen did not attend the memorial that was held for Christine 40 years after her death. In her book, Linda claims that a man approached her at the memorial and introduced himself as a former university police officer. He said that he was one of 2 cops that Christine Rothschild had spoken with on Bascom Hill when she had wanted to report Jorgensen's harassment of her. Oddly, there was no real explanation why he had not spoken up about this sooner in his life, and allegedly the former cop attempted to contact UWPD after the memorial to now, 40 years later, tell his account of meeting Christine and her concerns about Jorgensen. Linda says this man was dismissed by WPD as, quote, a nutcase. In fact, over the years, Linda and UWPD have not seen eye to eye. For example, several times Linda attempted to get cold case television shows involved in the case, but she needed UWPD's cooperation for that, something she claims she just never got.
They were all very enthusiastic and more than interested in Chris's case, but they said, we have to have UWPD involved in these episodes. We have to. And they would not even return her calls. It was always this kind of thing where I would pique somebody's interest and I would get somebody who had a connection with somebody very important in this or that. And they would be more than willing to talk to me, and they did. And then they'd say, now, Linda, in order for us to go a step forward, we have to have a contact at UWPD, and there has to be their consent for participation. And it always went to 0. It was kind of a dry end.
This is probably as good a time as any to tell you about the death of Niels' younger brother, Soren. At the time, Soren was 20 years old and Niels was 24.
He probably was responsible for the death of his own brother through jealousy.
Soren died while scuba diving off the shore of Santa Catalina Island. Linda states in her book that there was suspicion that Niels, who usually accompanied his brother on these boating trips, somehow had sabotaged Soren's scuba gear, causing his death.
For which his parents never forgave him, but his mother especially was just totally hate. His father got withdrawn, but his mother became hateful and disgusted and verbal. She also became alcoholic.
Although Niels did not attend that memorial on the 40th anniversary of Christine's death, Linda continued to correspond with him. By this time, Niels' mother had passed away, and Niels lived alone in the 2-bedroom apartment in Marina del Rey, California. Linda's contact with Jorgensen at that time could probably be categorized as harassment in a court of law, and yet Niels never reported her or made any official complaints. Every year she wrote him letters, she made calls, she sent him Valentine's cards, and she didn't beat around the bush. She communicated with Jorgensen in a manner that matter-of-factly acknowledged him as Christine's killer. She did this intentionally in an attempt to manipulate his narcissistic personality in the hopes that he might incriminate himself someday or reveal information that only the killer might know.
I could certainly say that I was flippant about her death when I talked to him about it, and that I would make like careless mistakes in details regarding her death to see if he really knew or if he was just messing with me. I was happy with myself at the end, but it would have sounded beyond disgusting and shameful if you heard it. Like saying, oh, how come you stabbed her 14 times? Kind of a bad aim for a doctor, for a surgeon. He couldn't even find her heart. As horrible as that sounds, I still played all my keys every time, whenever I could. Really disgusting remarks. And those remarks were made knowing what I was dealing with.
Jorgensen did at times take the bait, and often he would correct those inaccurate descriptions of the murder, but he seemed to always stop short of a confession or fully incriminating himself.
I realized if you're going to deal with a psychopath, all he cares about is himself to begin with. And second of all, anything you think is immaterial to him, but he'll be so condescending, he'll want to correct it, which he did each time. And he said, that's not accurate or that's not true.
It seemed clear to Linda that Jorgensen was not going to slip up. What she needed was to somehow infiltrate his life even further. But how could she do that, short of perhaps breaking into his apartment and searching for clues? In the end, she didn't have to do that, though. She found a surrogate, someone who already had access to Niels' apartment and to his life. It turned out that late in life, Niels Jorgensen finally made a friend, perhaps his first and only friend in his whole life. Linda learned about this friend almost by accident when speaking with one of Jorgensen's relatives.
And when she talked to me one time, she said, Niels was here recently, and he was with a really nice guy, and I have no idea in the world why that really nice guy would hang around with him. And I said, do you happen to know what his name is? And she said, yeah. And she told me.
All Linda had at first was a name, David Dahl, so she set out to contact him. She knew she wanted to talk to this person, and once again, if she had to, she would deceive them into giving her information, all in the name of her dear friend Christine Rothschild.
I called Los Angeles, and I called Santa Barbara, and I called San Francisco, and I called a dozen other places, and I got every David Dahl there was, and I called every single one of them and left a voice message, or I called back till I got them, and I finally found David Dahl. That's the kind of time it takes, and it's so repetitious, talking, they go, oh no, my husband's David Dahl, but he's 98 years old, or my son's only 16, that kind of thing. And it's like, oh, I thank you, it's not the David I'm looking for one that is a friend of so-and-so and blah blah. And I finally, again, hit the jackpot by finding him, and this led to unbelievable amount of information. I talked to David for a long time, and I told him that I knew Jorgensen from the University of Wisconsin, and I said that, he was kind of a loner, so he didn't have a lot of friends, and neither did I. And I said he was very abrasive, because I wanted to make sure people knew that I really knew him, kind of. And I said he's a hard guy to get to know, but I think he does have a heart beneath it all. And I said that, and he's a penny pincher, and this was all based on what I had known from other people. So he felt I knew him. And then he would start talking to me, because he had nothing to do. And so having a long hour and a half, 2-hour conversation with him was nothing. It was just like, I'd say, I'll call you in a week or so. And I said, we can, talk again about our mutual friend or something. And we'd laugh and ha-ha, and that was it. And we'd do it again.
Through her artful information gathering from David Dahl, Linda learned that his friendship with Jorgensen was based upon their mutual interest of hunting and fishing. And they were both lonely souls with no friends in the world, so it was kind of a match made in heaven for them. During her many phone calls with David Dahl, Linda continued to learn about the man she believes killed her friend Christine.
Niels Jorgensen, had 2 old cars parked in the parking lot there of his apartment complex that didn't even run. But Niels was a real penny pincher. He didn't really have to be, but he was, because he was living off of what's left of his parents' estate. He didn't have a job. He never did, really. He would have his friend David Dahl drive him to these discount food stores where they'd sell dented cans and everything, way on the other side of Marina del Rey where they lived. And he'd say, hey, let's just go to a regular grocery store and I'll supplement your food bill if need be. But these long rides are ridiculous just for a few dented cans or whatever. Well, I guess that Niels was adamant. He wanted it a certain way, so David was very compliant.
Linda learned from David that the 2 men spent a lot of time together on weekends hunting and fishing, which is a sport that provides a lot of opportunity for conversation and getting to know each other. She also learned that Niels had fed David a lot of his lies about his past, something David seemed to have swallowed hook, line, and sinker. At this early stage in her telephone relationship with David Dahl, Linda bit her lip and did not tell David what she knew about Jorgensen's true history.
Yeah, he said he's told me all about how he was in the Battle of the Bulge and in an invasion of Normandy, and how his brother Sorens died in the war. And my eyes are popping in my head. My mouth is as close as I could hold it, because his brother was just a kid when all this was going on in the war, and Niels was never in the war.
At one point, David told Linda about the many hunting and fishing trips the 2 men took together. David Dahl shared a detail that immediately caught Linda's attention. While David claimed to only hunt and fish as much as he could eat and to only kill an animal in the most humane way possible, Niels seemed to have a different approach.
And then he'd laugh and he'd say, yeah, but Niels is just kind of weird about that. He'll kill anything, and he says he'll kill as much as he can. And it kind of disgusted me sometimes how he would just enjoy those death squeals. And he said, like, if he's killing a rabbit, instead of like however you kill a rabbit humanely, if there's such a thing, he would enjoy like making it squeal for a little bit and then terminating it, that kind of thing.
And then, just when Linda thought there may not be a single bit of physical evidence left on the planet, anything that might tie Niels Jorgensen to Christine's death, David Dahl suddenly and casually mentioned something to Linda about his friend Niels.
And he says he has no fishing gear or anything of quality, and so I try to buy more or share mine. And then he said, but he's real crazy about that jacket of his. He says, I'll never forget that one night when he told me at the campsite, he says, yeah, I'm proud of this jacket because it has the blood on it of everything I've ever killed in my lifetime. Everything I've ever killed is what he said.
And so, of course, Linda immediately thought to herself, we have got to get our hands on that jacket. If Christine's blood and DNA is on that jacket, that would be a direct link from Niels Jorgensen to Christine Rothschild. Linda realized she needed to tell David Dahl about Christine Rothschild, about the murder, about Wisconsin Madison, and her suspicions towards Niels. And so she told him everything.
He listened very calmly to my whole, and I said, and I do believe that there's a possibility that there is evidence, trace blood evidence, possibly on that jacket from Chris. I told him how she died, and it wasn't like he was taking it as a personal statement about his friend. This was discussed several times. The bottom line was he believed what Niels told him, and I think he believed me, but he felt like he'd been deceived by me in our possible friendship that he and I had developed over the phone. And he was more dedicated, of course, to Niels than to me, so there was like a line in the sand at that point.
Niels Jorgensen died in 2013, and David Dahl was named as the executor of his will. When Linda discovered this, she called David Dahl one last time.
And I said, in conscience, I would still like you to turn the jacket in to the police because you were the one that was in charge. You were the executor of his will, and you cleared out his apartment and sold it, and you took all of his possessions. So you somewhere have that jacket. Turn it in. That was our last conversation.
When there was no indication that David Dahl was going to turn in Niels' hunting jacket, if it still existed, Linda attempted to make the existence of the jacket known to law enforcement.
I had contacted LAPD, to a homicide investigator, and specifically there's a hunting jacket that you need to be aware of in case, and I want you to know what I know.
According to Linda, the Los Angeles Police Department took Linda's information and then contacted the UWPD detective on the case at that time. Linda says that investigator was in no way happy to hear that Linda was still doing her own investigation.
Oh, I mean, she went ballistic. She must have told him I was like a crackpot and whatever, because I only got one more response, and that was to say that they had made contact with her. And they had been very interested in talking to me about the details of what I knew about him and about everything about him in Marina del Rey until UWPD was contacted by them.
To this date, there is no indication that Niels Jorgensen's hunting jacket has made its way into the hands of a crime lab. Linda believes that David Dahl is still alive somewhere. Still yet to come on future episodes of You Killed Chris, One Friend's Fight for Justice.
Then she was like, well, I have this number if you want to call him. Yeah, you know what? I would like to call him.
I did have an FBI because I have certain connections when I was Sergeant Major of Air Force Headquarters. That's how I cleared my name, because I was actually with a couple of students.
I really like Linda, who's kept eyes on this case for, over 50 years.
Well, maybe she refused some boy back in high school or something, and he took it out on her.
Dakota Spotlight is written and produced by me, James Wallner, and is a proud member of the Porchlight Podcast Network. A huge thank you goes out to Linda Shulko for her willingness to share her story with us. Check out her Kindle book, Murder on the 56th Day, available on Amazon.com. Linda donates all her proceeds from the book to charity. She requests you order the Kindle version and not the printed copy, as she no longer has copies available. I also recommend Kevin Damask's book titled Cold, The Unsolved Murders of 7 Young Women. See the links to both books in the show notes. A very special thanks goes out this season to Mari Zoerb Hansen, a 4th-generation UW alum, for all the amazing research, fact-checking, and just stellar assistance with this season. Mari's dedication and hard work on this story is in the memory of her late father, David Zoerb, who was finishing his senior year at UW when Christine was murdered. Thank you, Mari. Contact me by email at dakotaspotlight@gmail.com. Don't miss the amazing Dakota Spotlight Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/Dakota Spotlight. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time.